This podcast episode is made possible by wowdigital.com, your trusted partner for nonprofit and charity website and design.
Have you ever wondered how your nonprofit could break through borders and engage donors from across the globe? Today, we're diving into strategies that can make your organization a global success. Welcome to the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. As usual, I'm David, I'm your host. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about all things around international fundraising and digital marketing with Morgan Gross, the CEO and founder of Fundraising Beyond Borders. Fundraising Beyond Borders is an international fundraising consultancy dedicated to empowering nonprofits worldwide. With a focus on global donor engagement, Morgan provides fractional fundraising, custom plans, and one-to-one coaching to help organizations like yours confidently expand their impact across continents. Morgan's got a bit of an adventurous spirit, living in Africa for the last 8 years on a rural farm, a bee kind of swarming around her right now, with the nearest town 1.5 hours away and the closest grocery store and airport 6 hours away. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us from where you are right now. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Let's just jump in. What are the benefits and challenges of registering a nonprofit in another country?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really a unique situation when a nonprofit can go global or expand from one nation to the next. So, if you are registered in either North America, so either America or Canada, and you are wanting to expand to an African country or a South American or a European, there's a lot of benefits to that. So a lot of the nonprofits that I work with are international nonprofits. So they might be fundraising in America or Canada, but their work is abroad. And, a lot of my clients are around Africa, based in Africa. And so a lot of them are in Africa. And so oftentimes we see nonprofits wanting to register in another country because they either want to find new donors, new global donors, and they will also want to figure out, when you are bringing in international donors, they are wanting tax receipts. They are wanting build that donor trust and see that you're legally registered in other countries. So that's usually the main points to kind of why people want to expand, because they're finding new global donors or they're doing expanding programs in different countries.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many people on the planet and so many people that need help and support, whether it's financial, whether it's learning how to farm so they can be self-sustaining, right? There's so many great causes and people that can use support. It makes sense that organizations might want to expand and help out other areas of the planet, right? So I've got a nonprofit. I've decided I'm going to go and I'm going to expand internationally. What about localizing content? So you're speaking directly to the audience in maybe the host country versus the country that you're trying to do outreach and engagement in.
I'm glad you brought this up because I was just talking about this on my podcast with another guest, Ed Harris, and he was talking about, Google Translate. Yes, absolutely. You can add Google Translate. So if you have multiple different languages, that's a great place to start. But it's also making sure that you're kind of segmenting your audience on your website and what is important to them and what is, speaking their language, what is contextual to them, making sure that you are storytelling as well. Storytelling is really important into building donor trust and building donor transparency and credibility. So what might be an important story to an American might be different to somebody in the UK. So you can often story tell differently depending on your audience, but it's also giving a little bit more context to that country. And I would start with Google Translate. Sometimes I'm asked, should I create a whole separate website? And that's a lot. It's a lot of work to create multiple different websites. If you're small and you're just starting out, I would keep to one website. And then if it's multiple languages, adding kind of different elements in there that you can bring in. And then you can always expand to multiple websites. But with multiple websites is multiple upkeeps. And if one thing changes, the next thing has to change on the other website. So talk about it on your website, on the main page where you are based. So right straightforward, if you're based both in America and Tanzania, say that and share that. And then also too, very simple, like in the footer of your website, making sure that it's clearly stated that you're 501c3 registered in America and then you're also registered in Tanzania, state that. Just making sure if you have one website, you're very clear and transparent where you're based.
I love the idea of this around keeping one website. And for anybody that's here in Canada or the US, if you're based in Canada and I try to go, let's say, to the Best Buy website and I go bestbuy.com, I get a prompt saying, hey, we noticed you're in Canada. Do you want to go to the Canadian site or the US site? So you can do some, maybe a little bit of custom coding with geolocation information to be able to maybe help people guide them to the right thing. But having a page in the navigation that just says like the country, right? That you can drive traffic to those individual pages. You don't necessarily need a whole website built out for it, especially if you're starting up.
Exactly. No, I love that. And having a page dedicated to that specific country. And it's very dependent. Some nonprofits are just fundraising in America. They're not doing any of the programming. All the programming is abroad. So that's going to be a little different. But if you have multiple programs across the globe, then yes, absolutely. I would recommend having, different tabs or different web pages built into your website so somebody really understands what is going on in that specific country.
You talked about storytelling, and I think I've shown this on episodes before. There's a great book by Ian Harris called Hooked on You. The subtitle here is The Genius Way to Make Anybody Read Anything. And this is really about how to leverage storytelling to get your point across, to get people to care and read. Nobody really wants to read anymore. So how do we engage with people, right? So let's talk about that for a second here. How can a small nonprofit or even a big nonprofit leverage storytelling in a way that can help them with donors that might be continents away from them?
Yeah. So international nonprofits are going to have to work harder when it comes to storytelling. And that is because a lot of their donors aren't necessarily going to understand the barriers or the challenges or the everyday life of a beneficiary. So you're going to have to work a little bit harder to explain what your beneficiaries are going through, whether that's a person, an animal, a community, whatever that is. You're going to have to work a little bit harder. And so what I really like to do with nonprofits, especially international nonprofits, is choose 3 beneficiaries of your organization. And instead of just like updating, donors or an audience every once in a while on a story here and there, choose 3 and showcase their journey for an entire year and really allow them to get to know a beneficiary. A audience member, so a donor or potential donor, is going to be able to see what that beneficiary is going through and really understand it and start from the basics. So, instead of saying, I'm going to say, here in my life in Zambia is going to be very different to my life in America, where in America, I was very busy, busy, busy. And where here in Zambia, I take my time and I wake up to the beautiful sunset that is usually orange and red as it's rising through the trees. And we have monkeys all around us. So you kind of hear the monkeys diving through the trees and like, really get descriptive with your storytelling because, again, so many people aren't going to fully understand maybe that place or that scene or what the beneficiary is going through. So that gives you a really good opportunity for an entire year to follow a couple beneficiaries' journeys and get to know them. And that's how you build donor trust as well. That's how you build transparency and talk about the highs, talk about the lows, talk about behind the scenes and get testimonials and things like that. So that's one of my favorite things to do with international donors.
I love the idea of that. And if you can empower them with a camera, a cell phone, something like that, where they can take pictures as they go about their day or their week or their month, you can put a video together with pictures. It helps tell the story more if you've got some visual to go along with it.
I agree. And I'm glad you brought that up because it leads to kind of 2 points is A, when you give the camera or the video, whatever tool you're using to that person, they are telling their story. And I'm all about ethical storytelling. So definitely that is empowering them to tell their story in their own eyes. So absolutely. And then you really just get to better understand who they are. And I would try different types of media too, right? So anything for that entire year. So anywhere between video, but then also, the testimonials can go really far and just putting a quote up on the screen. And there's so many different things you can do on social media, turning it into a blog. So like, how can you repurpose that content across all your marketing, not just on social media, but on your website with donors, donor communication, donor engagement, sending off a quick video to a major donor, just saying, this reminded me of your donation and this is what your donation is doing and sending that quick video off. So it gives you a lot of content that you can repurpose.
Even if you had them maybe write a letter or draw a picture and include stuff like that, artifacts, like if they're going and helping weave baskets, include some of that stuff there so that it helps build the stories and authenticity behind it.
Yes. And that's what I also wanted to say. And I love that we were just talking about it before we hopped on here, wasn't it? Is like authenticity. It does not have to be this formalized video that is put together by a professional. Like people want to see the realness. So if it's a camera phone, that's great. That's absolutely fine. Yes, every once in a while, professional video is great, but people want to see the realness behind it.
We talked about storytelling. We talked a little bit about website. You can have a page or not have a page or have multiple sites for different countries, that type of thing. But let's take a step back for a second and talk about the website in general. Are there any specific elements that you think should be on a website that would help cater to those folks who are interested in engaging, donating, volunteering on an international level?
Yeah, when it comes to engaging, I really like to think about it in making sure that you have virtual experiences, right? So, a lot of people aren't able to actually go in person to actually see it. So, what are some creative ways to create virtual experiences, whether that's webinars, whether that's Q&A sessions on Zoom, whether that's behind the scenes live video on Facebook and Instagram, whether it's a one-on-one talk to a beneficiary, just kind of getting creative with virtual experiences. But when it comes to your actual website, my favorite page is the donate page, right? So, how can you make sure that you are creating a donate page that has multiple different currencies, that has multiple languages, the different types of ways that actually a donor can carry out their transaction? So, whether that's credit card, Venmo, Apple Pay, Google Pay, check, maybe you have a donor advised fund, or maybe you need to utilize a fiscal sponsor, so having a fiscal sponsor come into play so that a Canadian can donate to an American nonprofit and get a tax receipt, or, vice versa, whatever that might be. So, when it comes to the donate page, there's so many cool tools out there. So, definitely look into some tools as an international nonprofit that allows multiple currencies to happen. And then, if your checkout process doesn't allow you to have multiple currencies, it's really very much like clearly labeling UK donors donate here, Canadian donors donate here, whatever it might be. So they clearly know where to go, and it can be a really quick and fast process to actually check out. So tech, I mean, you gotta love it these days. There's just so many cool tech tools out there that allow for multiple international donors to actually carry out their transaction.
Something that I do want to touch on with regards to donation forms is keep it as minimal as possible. Don't ask them for like their entire life history. You can build out donor profiles later on. Don't worry about that. Make it as easy as possible for somebody to just give you their money. They're on the page. They care about your organization. Whatever drew them there, make it easy.
Exactly. And it's just like, shopping on Amazon. Like, think about how quickly we can press submit on Amazon these days. And, it's a delivery the next day. So it's kind of like a similar process. You want them to have a very seamless, easy checkout experience. I was actually on a board call yesterday with a foundation, and one of the board members was like, it would be really great to know their birthdays. Can we get that on the form? And I was like, I love that. Like, we can send them birthday cards, but we're going to get that information post checkout. So we're going to want to make it as easy as possible. And that's a great way to engage a donor afterwards. It's like, hey, thank you so much for your donation. I would love to know, when is your birthday? It can be in an automated receipt or the second email welcome series, whatever that might be. But I completely agree. It needs to be as easy as possible.
Could even be a second form after they've donated, asking them, like, why did you decide to give to us? You can understand the rationale behind it, the meaning, all of that. You can ask some other details like birthday, for example, as well. So I think that's definitely an opportunity to grow your CRM and to get insight like that, but don't do it on the donation form. Let's just make it simple. So we talked about websites having potentially a page for the country or a section or a separate site, that type of thing. We were talking about storytelling a little bit, but let's talk about social media. You have an organization, and that organization serves people in 4 countries. Should you have separate social profiles? Should you do it all in the one? How do you speak to those different audiences that might care about this country, but not those ones?
Sure. That's a big question I get asked often. And I think it always depends on where you are, right? So if you're a smaller nonprofit, if you're just getting your social media up and running, let's stick to one profile and get really good at it. And there's different ways you can talk to donors. So, you have your different, what I call bubbles, your highlights on Instagram, and you can have it per country if you needed to do it that way. And there's different ways. If you have, say, you're across 3 different countries, you can pin them across your Instagram profile and speak to that. So, like, if you are just starting out, let's start small and be really good at it. But then there is the opportunity to expand, right? It's just knowing how much capacity your team has. So with social media equals consistency if you're going to be really good at it. So if you can be consistent at opening another page, let's do it. Like, let's absolutely do it, because then you can kind of start segmenting and talking specifically to that region or to those programs or whatever it is. So if you're working in multiple different countries and the programs are in different countries and you have the opportunity to scale, let's do it. If you are a nonprofit, and these are a lot of my clients, is like I was saying earlier, you're just fundraising in America or in Canada, but your programs are abroad and all your programming happens just in one country, I'm going to recommend to just keep one Instagram profile or one Facebook profile because the fundraising is going towards only that one program in that one country.
I think that's a smart way to do it. And just because something's working on one social media platform for you for that country doesn't mean it'll work with the other countries, right? So I think really understanding where your audience is hanging out, where you can connect with them, where you might be able to leverage social in your favor is an important thing to play with. So yeah, Instagram might work really well for you targeting this audience because they're interested in this. You might need to go to TikTok or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever else is going to be out there to connect with that audience that cares about this other country.
I agree. And, I really like to do a lot of surveying with my donors and with my audience. So I really love it when we actually survey our audience. So if you have one really good account, but you have followers from another country, go and ask them. So segment them and go and say, hey, if you're in Australia, where do you hang out? Where do you like to be? Also use email marketing for that too, and surveying and finding out, or, start talking to other nonprofits as well and seeing where they've seen success in that specific country. So definitely I recommend surveying your audience and figuring out where they're hanging out.
Great idea. Absolutely love it. Morgan, amazing insights around international fundraising, digital marketing tactics for nonprofits and charities. I hope that folks listening to this, so all of you are able to get some really great advice, insights, pointers, things like that, that will help you expand or reach the people that you need to reach. So I just want to put you on the spot for a moment here, Morgan. If you can issue a challenge to anybody who's listening to this episode to do within the next 2 to 3 days of listening to this, what would that challenge be?
Yep. And I just said this challenge actually yesterday too, and it's gathering those 3 beneficiary stories. So I'm going to go back to storytelling. So figuring out who those 3 beneficiaries are and figuring out how you can storytell with them over an entire year and start slowly implementing their stories. You're going to see a really great change in engagement and building donor trust and showing that transparency. And like I said, repurpose that material. So yes, put it on social media, do it on your blogs, donor engagement, your emails, whatever it might be. So grab those 3 people, animals, communities that you want to follow for next year and start implementing.
Such a great idea. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, they want to ask you a question or engage or connect with you to have you help them, what do they need to do?
Yeah, you can follow me at Fundraising Beyond Borders. I am really active on LinkedIn and Instagram, so definitely send me a DM there. And then you can also find me on my website, fundraisingbeyondborders.com.
Amazing. Thanks again so much for joining, Morgan. It's been great having you here on the Nonprofit Digital Success Podcast. To everybody listening, if you want any of the resources, links, the transcript from this episode, we have full transcripts of all of our episodes. Just head over to our podcast page at nonprofitdigitalsuccess.com. Click on this episode for all the details. And until next time, keep on being successful.